So I was very excited to be able to get back in connection with you again, because there was a couple things I just wanted to have a conversation about. And one of them was the Magdelita, because it's really become, I mean, this is something that you have brought to the forefront for a while now, but it has really taken center stage. And as a forerunner, I mean, it might seem like it's a little behind the curve, yet I think there's still that are really trying to comprehend this marriage of these energies between Ishu and the Magdalita, and what does that really mean? And then the second thing that I really would like to just have just a chat about today is the different forms. I had an experience, and let me back up a little bit. I had an experience that happened to me the other night that was just really profound, and I'm still trying to assimilate it within me. And the language comes to me at night, and I will have words and things that will come to me in my nighttime hours, and I wake up and I can feel a profound shift has taken place, even though sometimes it takes a couple days for that frequency to shift all the way through. But it was really about the word Melta, and the word, also the word for parable, the speech within the speech, the memlel, and just the root meaning word. And so I wanted to have a discussion on that. I mean, I know that can be a very big, broad topic.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, it allows us to go in a lot of different directions. So,
well, as Ruka is moving you, I am wanting to hear from you, from your heart, for all the years of experience that you've had in the language. Because like I said, Aramaic is fairly new to me because I spent so much time in Hebrew, but it's more transformative. It's like the foundation was laid, and then all of a sudden there's this infilling that is happening through the Aramaic, and it's really profound.
yeah, I think we can talk
words.
even about that a
Please,
little.
please,
You know,
let's do it.
but like you know, and it's funny, like 30 years ago, I would go to these Semitic symposiums and I would just sit in the back of the room and wouldn't say much of anything. And I would watch all these heavy arguments and people, you know, debating to beat to beat upon, you know, is the Latin root there. But I would watch these debates, I'd listen, I wouldn't say much, and then well, this one particular time, I put my meek little hand up. I'm like, and everybody kind of turns and looks, you know, at this nobody, and they're like, you know, my perception here is that maybe this really seems like it's some kind of a technique or something, possibly. Has anybody actually tried putting it into practice instead of just tearing apart the letters? And it was the wildest thing. Everybody in the whole room staring at me, total silence.
Oh,
and then they all look away, and nobody even acknowledged that I had said anything. And I felt like that big, but I already knew. I'm like, okay, I'm going to breathe. I'm breathing. But then that was my crash course in how a lot of the facts of the history of Semitic languages are recorded, is through that kind of a system. But also when I really started going backward and digging, and there's so many books on my shelf that, you know, and so many behind me, but it's an intriguing thing how Aramaic was sort of left alone. It was and all of this, the actual evidence that we have is that it was spoken first, and Hebrew was written first by hundreds of years.
Yes.
But some people consider, and this is funny, if you talk to most Hebraic scholars, it's all about the miracle of Hebrew, and Aramaic is just the red-headed stepchild. Funny, though, they'll have to admit that Aramaic was there first. Not all. There's some Hebraic scholars, some that are more Semitic scholars that have the balance, I should say. Although then what they'll do is they'll take Hebrew and Aramaic and they'll push Arabic over here, not even talking about Akkadian, Phoenician, Sumerian, all the others. But what tended to happen was Aramaic, much like, you know, indigenous languages here in the U.S., like Tiwa, were sort of left alone, and they just evolved and started morphing into all these different not just dialects, but even like subdialects and things that we don't even have, hermeneutic names for. All these little subgroups and subgroups. And, you go to Boston and they park the car, and you go down south and,
Right.
it's howdy, and all that.
Right.
These kinds of things happen to the nth degree over the course of hundreds and hundreds and ultimately thousands of years. But what had happened by that point was Hebrew was already pulled off and set in a place. And it let me just be clear about what happened. The Aramaic was left to the, and I'm not saying the women controlled it, but it was almost left to a matriarchy. It was allowed to evolve and grow on its own, just kind of pushed off on the side, whereas Hebrew was put front and center and the patriarchy moved in, and it was heavily standardized. And
Yes.
how we write it is standardized. And while Aramaic just kind of fell into things like diacritical marks, phonetic markings, etc., Hebrew, it was all very standardized. And then, of course, within the last couple of hundred years was kind of even shifted again. But it's a funny thing that so much more faith is kind of, our attention is put into something like that. Whereas you look over toward Aramaic, and it's still rooted in the earth. It's almost like, there's a great quote from Father Thomas Berry, where he said, "The earth was once molten lava, and now she is singing opera."
So beautiful.
For me, that, Aramaic is the opera, and
Yes.
Aramaic is the language of the celestial realms.
Yes.
Constantly, maybe not Aramaic specifically, but those roots that are there that came from Aramaic before Hebrew even existed
Yeah.
came from somewhere. And
Right.
funny too that Aramaic actually popped up in these really disconnected geographical lands at the same time, that just kind of rose up all at once. And so, but the funny thing about Aramaic is the fact that it was let to simmer and stew off to the side. It also essentially means we don't really know too much about a lot of things. And things like pronunciations are, I just got to be clear with people, they're guesses at best.
Sure.
And, so with Hebrew, you have this, I don't want to go quite so far as to say an illusion of orthodoxy, but it's kind of what it is. We have this idea of something that has stayed, maintained its own thing for 2,000 years. And I think in a large way it has. But the thing that's not acknowledged about Hebrew is the little tweaks that have happened along the way by people
Right.
that, are the ones who, were in positions of power or knowledge to be able to do those kinds of things because they're already directly connected to God, whatever that may be.
Right.
And unfortunately, those are the things that kind of get us into trouble. But Aramaic is just, it's one of those things that when I hear it and I hear the root sounds in Lakota and other places, even the
Yes.
letters,
Yeah.
um, it's just incredible how uh, it's still here.
Exactly.
I don't know how many people tell me, "Oh yeah, Aramaic, that's a dead language, right?" Well,
No,
no,
it's not. It
no,
never
it's not
was.
actually.
Yeah, no, it never
So
was.
yeah,
And it's interesting because as you were saying that, I, with my journey with the Aramaic, I get really emotional when I talk about it because of just how much it stirs the heart fire. I mean, it truly does. And I've come to this point where as much as I want to be able to speak it, I fumble around like a little first grader, and I'm okay with that. It's good to realize that that's really where I am at it and be totally okay with it instead of saying I need to be in perfection. But I've really come to terms with the essence of studying it and in allowing it to become part of you. And so instead of focusing so much on how I need to pronounce the word or whatnot, let the letters speak to my heart, because it's that place, then it transforms me, and then I become the word made flesh. It,
hmm
like there's no, and then I wonder, well, how much is the letters more in a telepathic manner? That's kind of mind
Oh,
candy. I go on
well,
that, but how
I know we
much of
could
it
go
is
off on a
telepathy?
tangent easily with that. So
Because I'm telling you, they come to me at night and they speak to me. And then some people look at me like, well, what do you mean they come speak to you? And I'm like, this energetic exchange is not something that is spoken. It's like they imprint me within here, and all of a sudden there's a knowing that wasn't there previously because they presented themselves to me. So how can that be anything other than telepathy? Because it's this exchange that happens, And then all of a sudden I'm shifted and there's something completely different when I wake up in the morning, because they did present myself, because I've opened
So
myself to receive.
a lot of the teachings, you know, or a lot of the gnosis that I've received happened exactly that way at night in the dream
Yes.
state. And a
Yes.
lot of people, you can't even mention that because they'll be like, no, no, what school did you go to? What, you know, like, and 25 years ago, forget it. There are some places you can go now. Unfortunately, every single one, yeah, the theology is the frustration for me.
Yes.
It's so
Thank
hard to
you.
get past,
Thank
to
you.
find a place or a person who can just give it to you straight beyond theology. That's number one.
Yes.
And number two, it's difficult to find, and this has been my actual mission. It's difficult to find someone who can give you the widest breadth of what a word, a root, a letter can actually mean, not in the way that the commoners would have understood it, but what's the widest breadth of what Yeshua could have been trying to bring through here, taking standard words and, you know, fitting this into this. And it's funny because the theology literally chokes that ability dead. It chokes it dead on the floor.
I
And
know.
it's really difficult to find someone. That's why, you know, as an example, Neil Douglas Klotz, Neil was, you know, 30 years ago, just took my heart and went, "Rah," you know, tore it open. And he was like, he had studied with Rocco, my, you know, my
Yes.
dear buddy mentor.
Yes.
Um, and then he sort of went off and he was really deep into Sufism and he was studying Arabic and all these other things. And he started getting into the roots and studying
Hmm.
Faber d'Olivet and all this deeper stuff. And all of a sudden he came out, well, let's look at the widest nuance of what this could be. And he would have this really huge, heart opening, you know, explanation for just a word. And it's funny that people would go, oh my God. And then they'll hear his, you know, translation, you know, oh, you know, Father, Mother, Birther of the Cosmos of the Lord's Prayer. And people go, that's what it said in Aramaic. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. No, 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 no. No, that's a poetic rendering inspired
Yes.
by the deeper
Yes.
meanings of the Aramaic. The commoner would have probably just heard, you know, our parent, our father, our creator who is everywhere. You know, that's what
Right.
they would have heard.
Right.
But what Yeshua was trying to put across here is something so much wider and beyond that. And the theology kills it,
Yep.
especially that illusion of orthodoxy, that sort of standardization of thought, or even someone, you know, mentioning Milta, it's like someone thinking that it's whatever, the word of God, not knowing what word of God even means,
Right.
and that somehow it's going to be okay through all these 17,000 translations of it. It's not okay because I've
No,
looked at
it's not.
so many of them. It's not okay. It's
No.
bastardized and torn apart
Yeah.
and turned into the golfer's Bible, the the college graduates Bible, the college hopefuls Bible, the high school graduates Bible, the doctor's Bible. It's like I used to work at a publishing place down in Florida,
Oh my.
and we did all the chicken soup for the soul stuff. I'm like, how many of
Yes.
these chicken soup for the golfer's soul, chicken soup for the car mechanic's soul, chicken soup for the? I'm like, really? But Bibles
I
are like
remember
that. You
that.
go into a Christian bookstore and you're going to find all these crazy Bibles,
Exactly.
and they are different. It's not just a lot of times in the footnotes or in, you know, the different annotations that they've got in there, but a lot of times the actual text changes,
Yes.
and that is absolutely 100% unacceptable.
You know, and I
So
totally agree 100% with you. 100%. I have gone through my anger phase, and I can't say
yeah,
that I'm completely through that yet. But whenever, I mean, I'll open up and I'll begin looking. I've been digging into like Revelation chapter 19 and 20, and I
hmm
am like, I mean, my heart just is soaring. And then I'll look at how they translated, or, you know, they'll take the word beast, kaiutha, and then they'll use it about the messengers that open the scrolls, but yet they've tainted it to make it look like it's not the same. And then, of course, trying to shove it into a one meaning. Like, I'm going to take one word and I'm going to translate it and use one word, or maybe two for
yeah.
grammatical purposes. But then the essence is gone. It is just completely gone. And so I've definitely gone through the anger phase with that, for sure. But you know, it's interesting that you're bringing all this up, because this is something that why I really wanted to discuss this with you today, is because I've had people say to me, and I'm sure you've heard this before many times, and they'll say, "Do I have to study this?
I
Are
get
you
it. Yeah.
saying that I have to study this in order to be saved? And, my response has been to them, no, you don't have to. I'm not telling anybody anything. I'm just sharing discoveries that have been made manifest within here. That's all I'm doing. And I believe that's what Yeshua is doing as well. And like you were talking about for the commoner, that they would hear a certain thing, the stuff that we're trying to get into is that sod, that deep level,
Hmm.
intimate level of the writings, because that's where the heart change produced. So I'm having more difficulty in my response to that. And so I'm actually being left more in silence than responding. It's kind of like, how can
Absolutely.
I tell you? How can I tell you this when
You
spirit
went
is the
through
one
the
that has to draw you?
change. Yeah, I get it
I'm
totally.
like, I'm there. And so this morning, this is what I heard. I'm getting ready in the restroom, my bathroom, and putting my hair up in a ponytail so it doesn't look like a chaotic mess for our conversation today. And I heard this: you are not able to become the word manifested into flesh if you go through another man's word.
It has that. Well, that's the Orita as well. It's the
Exactly.
difference between the Namosa that we live up to, that we
Right.
try to fit within, the
Right.
guidelines, we try to stay on the path, versus that Ora Orita, that
Exactly.
experience that lives through us. That's our innate guidance system, our innate GPS of sorts. And there's a huge huge difference there. And I often say to people, like, years ago, people would, like, I remember meeting this kid in Chicago 10 years ago, and he came, brought his family, brought him, and like everybody in the room's looking at me, like everybody had a conversation before I had walked into the room. There's like 120 people at this event, and I'm like, what's going on? Why is everybody looking at me? And they push this kid up to me, and he's like 15 years old. And they're like, Dale, I'm not going to name his name. But you know, he has basically, and they're like, let's just let, these guys talk. And he's shaking, and he's like, he said, I've memorized, even at that point, I already, I had quite a few videos on YouTube for several years. And he's like, I've memorized word for word, your video about blah, your video about blah, blah, your video about blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
And we just started talking. And he was like, I got to a point where I felt like all of a sudden there was no point to what I was doing. And that's because you're feeding off of me. I'm kind of joking with him.
Exactly.
And I was like,
Exactly.
it's a huge place to be able to move from that to realizing that it's inside of you. And it's not about the books. Trust me, if there's anything, it was not in any book that I ever read.
No.
They would touch it. It was in how open I was willing to be, which is, of course, before a healing, Yeshua would say, Et fatach, in the one, the fatach right there, it means literally open.
Right.
And
Right.
it's like that's the key to all of it. It's not,
Mhm.
and people will say, yeah, but people will often come to me and they're like, they want to learn the language. I'm like, sure, I can show you the alphabet. I can show you
Yes.
the markings. We can do that. We can look at roots. Well, root sounds is more interesting than that to me. I don't, but I'm like, all that you're going to end up doing is looking at a text, depending on how much time you spend with it, and you're still just going to see theology there, because most people are just living on the Peshat level. If
Yes,
you
they
get all
are.
these tele-evangelists in Christianity in America, they maybe literally mez there a little bit, slightly getting into the allegorical. You'll never see them go down to the drash, to the comparative, the midrashic, or the sod. It's not going to happen. But you'll see them all just kind of exist up here, which is most people.
Right.
And unfortunately, well, maybe fortunately, growing up in the Methodist church, it was all at the top.
Right.
And I mean, I'm sitting there and I'm watching the same people that I've loved for years, my family and they're just kind of sitting there like this on a summer's day, listening to the minister. And then they stand, bless their hearts. They stand up, they go to the back, they shake his hand, and then they go downstairs for coffee and cookies, and the kids have punch there. So, and it's like, and I remember sitting there going, this doesn't, I used to be able to sit up in the balcony until they realized that I was one of the ones shooting spitballs and I had learned how to arc them. Yeah, it was a certain, like, a way to project them upward at about a 45-degree angle. And that's when I realized, rather than shooting straight, if you shoot upward toward the heavens, you're kind of aiming toward the halo of the Jesus up there, that it'll actually go farther. So I
That's so
learned that,
awesome.
and then they would have, older people sit up there with us and watch us. But I would be able to sit there and look and watch all these heads going, and
I
I'm
know,
sitting there going,
right?
something's not right here. I don't know.
No.
I just like,
Well, there
so
was no
it was then.
chaya.
I'm 7 years
There's
old. I'm like, I need it
no
more. What's that?
chaya. No chaya. No life.
Not at all. There was just
Zero.
it was, bless their hearts, and it was safe, and I understand it. And a lot of those people are still at that church. Well, some of the people, a lot of them have long since died, but I
Right.
know of several that are still going to that church. And it's funny because I remember a while ago, oh my God, they've got an Instagram page, and oh my God, that's the minister. And I tried friending him. He would never accept my friend request. He doesn't know who I am.
Right.
Uh, and on Instagram, they never would follow me back. But it was just a funny thing. There was all this nostalgia for me, but at the same time, as exciting as those roots are for me, that nostalgia smelled like an old dusty bookshelf, like walking into an old
Exactly.
library. And looking
Exactly.
at it now, I think they're trying to open it a little. But here's the thing. The reason they're trying to open it up to a little more nuance is because their numbers dwindled.
Exactly.
And I'm like, that's not the reason to dig deeper. You should be
No.
digging deeper because you have no other choice. You have to dig deeper. But I
Well,
didn't know anybody at that
no,
age that wanted
it's
it that deep.
scary.
Nobody.
It's scary. And the reason why I say it's scary is that the egoic shadow self that's out here, look at me, don't look at the real me because I don't want you to see the real me. As soon as you start touching into those deeper things, you can't help but experience the hidden aspects of you. And of course, we know that's very intentional because in
Yeah.
those hidden aspects, that's the only place where we can transform them. And so, I mean, I have seen my husband and I have attempted to share this with many people. And this is one of the reasons why I decided to move into the YouTube arena is because the people that were around us that we were influencing in our daily lives couldn't receive this. And if they did, I would find, we both would find that they would spit themselves out. It would come to a certain point where they would start getting into that deeper level, that sod level, and it was too much. I mean, they literally spun themselves out because they couldn't handle it. Because at the same time, simultaneously, things would surface
Hmm.
and they would just agitate themselves out. And that's how I got healed. I mean, that's truly how I got healed. I started putting so much of the light language within me that the darkness had to rise. And then there was nothing I could do about it. It was fully manifested in my face, and I had to face it. And it was because of the languages. There's no amount of surface English reading of your Bible that is going to do that for you.
Mm.
And, I love the fact that you brought up the theology aspect of it because I looked at the etymology of theology, and it means to create words to describe religious concepts.
Hmm.
So theology wasn't even based on anything other than trying to, and then when you trace it with
It's
the thought
common opinion
process,
in a
it
way,
is.
basically.
And the whole purpose of it was we're going to use these common words to lock you down and to bind you into a thought form in order to explain what we want you to understand. Understand, never
Hmm.
understanding.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're right, without, because I've seen other people that will bring in Aramaic, but there's such a strong theological bent. It's like they can't stop and take a look at it in the organic sense of what this is saying and allow the rucha to explain it. It's like, no, the ego has to jump in and the ego has to go, well, it has to mean this, it has to mean this because of my theology. It's just,
Hmm.
it's too scary to go outside of the box for many. And so I look at it as the sacred languages are really for the brave, the courageous ones,
Yeah.
because you are going to see beyond. You are going to see beyond.
Yeah, and a lot of people had no business translating who translated it. A lot of these things, if someone hasn't had some semblance of the experience being addressed in a text, they're not going to really be able to translate that.
No.
So, and what do they do then? In my opinion, at that point, give me all the nuances of what something might mean. And that's the different, I'll take people like Willis Barnstone, Marvin Meyer. To me, these epic, Marvin especially, Marvin's like a translating, icon for me. And it's like what I do is I'll take something like that if it's in a language that I don't know quite as much about, and then I'll try to find out what's all the possibilities of the nuance of what
Yes,
this word can mean.
exactly.
And then I'll go in a text and I'll take that black and white stodgy thing, and then I'll try to find out what everybody's opinion
Yes,
is about one
yes,
word, and then
yes,
I'll move to the next word. What's everybody's opinion here? What's all
yes.
go into all the lexicons, go into everything.
Yep.
And to me, you know, in my mentoring program, that's a lot of what I love to work with people. I tell them I don't necessarily have to teach you the language. I can show you how to get behind a curtain and give you just enough resources that you can do this yourself and open it up from the
Yes.
inside out.
That's
And that's the
yes.
thing. And you didn't have to go to some school for 10 years that doesn't
No.
even fully exist outside of the theology of it. So, and I can even show you how to, you know, and these are things that, you know, after I'm like, God damn it, oh, excuse me. It's like
I don't
everything that
care.
I had to go through to learn all this. And now all this stuff, a lot of things, it's right there at people's fingertips. But the
Right.
thing is, you still have to be able to have that experiential fire that's there in the first place for you to be able to even comprehend a lot of it. So and that's the thing. And you know, thanks to the internet, and everything on the internet is true, of course. Not exactly, but it's like a lot of this stuff is available
Oh
to
my God.
basically anybody who
Exactly.
can start
The
digging into it.
desire,
So
the desire has to be there to begin with. And
yeah.
so I love the way that you are helping with people, because that's exactly what my thought process has been and how I've handled my students that come to me for tutoring on this. It's like I can point you in the direction, but really, unless you do your own excavation, I can't hand it to you on a platter. Because if I were to hand it to you on a platter and say this is this and this is this and this and this, it's going to be handled as common, and you're not going to value it, because it's the struggle in the wrestle that produces the fruit in the nature, because you invested your own time and energy into wrestling with it, because you're just wrestling yourself.
Yeah.
It's a mirror of you.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm gonna show you something here, like one of
Please.
the why is it saying its folder is empty? Not empty. Oh, I see. I'm in the wrong folder. So, like one of the things I'll do is, and this is nobody's ever seen this before, and I'm gonna just kind of show it, you know, quickly. But um, this is something like people that I work with. I work on different levels. Can you let me screen share?
Oh, sure. Yeah, sorry about
Um,
that. You said you were
no, it's
going to,
okay.
and I'm like, oh, all
It's
right.
okay. The like I'll work, some people will want to dig into the Lord's Prayer and they want to look at every word, they want to look at the phrases, they want to look at the roots, and then even get down to the letters. So I have different levels. I can't really show the one thing, but I'll show you, like, as an example. This is kind of this I call well, this is actually this one here. I'm in the Beatitudes. So this is like a Beatitudes simple sheet here
Mm-hmm.
where I show, you know, I don't even have the diacritical markings in here,
Right.
but the
Right.
letters,
Yep.
and you've got, you know, obviously the pronunciation of it that I
Yeah.
work with, and then a lot of this one here doesn't show. This one here is like blessed are they. It's not exactly blessed are they to Vehun. There's a lot more going on there, but I
Exactly.
use the simple sheet as a reference to show them, you know, what does something really mean on a deeper level. But then what we have is I have this, like, that's called a full master sheet, where each word has like all this nuance. And what I'll do is show people, like, Tube Hun has a freaking paragraph just
Yes,
all
it
about
does.
that one.
Yes, it
And
does.
sometimes the word "are," you know, can have something like that, like something that's a real, you think is just another word there that's like a common colloquial thing. But a lot of times there's a depth in it and there's layers that you're not going to get if somebody gives you the translation. So the point of what I'm
Exactly.
doing is basically I sit people down, and this is just one of the many things I do, but and it's like, let's look at the nuance of this. And we'll go through like the 10 Beatitudes from Matthew, word for word, phrase by
Mm-hmm.
phrase, letter by letter. And what I'm doing though is I'm not doing that thing where you dump information on someone. Okay, memorize this. No, 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 no,
Mm-mm.
no, no. I'm
Mm-mm.
pulling it out. And by the end, I'm telling them, okay, now I don't want you to use my translation exactly. I want you to create your own.
Yes,
And
because
that's what it's about. That's
it
the,
is.
yeah.
It's creating ourselves. It's revealing ourselves to ourselves, and that's why the spirit. And I'm so glad we went in this conversation because I really felt that Rucha say you cannot become anything through another man's word.
Yeah.
It's not possible. All you're doing when you do that is you're getting philosophy because it's staying up
I'm laughing
here.
because Christianity with a phrase like that's gone.
I know, and
But
you
it's
know what? I
true.
don't care.
It's
It
based
is.
on, it's not even Jesus's word that it's based on. Let's
No,
remember that.
no, it's not. And so I wanted, if I can, because I'm so excited because I'm
Do it.
seeing how
Tear
you're
it up.
doing, I wanted to show you this as well because it's like, oh my gosh. So when I share with this is just here's our little sharing show and tell here. But when I share with people, I do something similar. I mean,
Mhm.
I put everything in here. I put the translated mechanical works. I put kind of what the Peshitta is saying, and then I do my own
Awesome.
exegesis work, and I bring everything in. The only thing that I don't do is, unless it's something I'm really focusing on, like the Lamed itself.
Hmm.
I usually don't bring in the letter meanings because that is already with Mother's teaching. That is such a foundational principle that is underneath that
Yeah.
I don't feel like I need to bring it in because that is already made manifest in here. It's like I
Yeah.
look at the letter and I know that it's just the information energetic is there. So I'm very excited because that's exactly, we have different ways of being able to show and put it together, but we're doing the same thing because spirit is leading us to do so. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh, it's so amazing. You are such an encouragement to me. You really truly are because it's been calling, and just being able to know that this is we're we're the same. We're the same.
Yeah, and there's
We're
nothing
the
like that when you're
same.
staring at the same thing for years. My wife will see me and I'll walk up and I'll say something that's not in English and she's just looking at me like I don't know what you're talking about. And I'll be like, "Well, look, for like the last 25 years I've been staring at this word or this
Right.
phrase." And then all of a sudden today it was like I saw it for the first time.
Yes.
And it's like I'm crying and I'm laughing and my nose
Yep.
is running. And even more exciting to me is when I find roots, when I find common roots in different words. And like on the surface, if you're on that Peshat, forget, you're not going to
You can't
see
see
how
it.
does that and what's the
No.
common thread between that? There is nothing. But when you
No.
start going lower, all of a sudden it's like, wait a second here. Okay, now I actually understand, and it's things that in English, if somebody doesn't tell you about the connection, you'll never, ever, 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 ever pick it up
No.
from an English translation that's
No.
2,000 years removed from what was actually there. And it's amazing that, like, when other people hear it, they like, I'll be like just speaking and I'll throw out one little thing. I have to remember sometimes that to me, something that feels ho hum that I talked about, say, 20 years ago, a
Is
lot of
new.
people, when they first hear it, they go, and they're like, and they'll literally burst into tears. Or
Mhm.
my favorite is actually, I'll be like up, it could be 100 people, 200 people, it could be 10 people. And all of a sudden, I'll say something and I'll just give them, the truth of what something is. And they'll just burst out laughing. And it's usually a
Yep.
woman because the women are the ones that just allow it to, and
Exactly.
they'll be like, and I've
I
had
call it
women like putting,
champagne.
well,
I
I've had
call
them
it
putting their
champagne.
hands over their face and they're
No.
crying and they're laughing and they're jumping up
I
in their
know.
seat. And I'm like, no, no, let it happen. I'm like, it is hilarious. It's hilarious for several reasons. One, that these stupid idiots who tried to conceal this from our view thought we wouldn't figure this out. And number two,
Right.
just the fact that, just the amaze. It's almost like a baby's being born right before your eyes. You're like, oh my
Right.
God, how did nobody not see this?
I
And
know.
then you're going, the third part, you're going, well, of course that's what it means. It's common. A lot of the stuff is just, it's common. Well, it should be common
There
sense.
we go.
You just look at it and you're like, of course that's what that actually meant. Rather than
Exactly.
all of these supposed Bible experts who don't even know what they're talking about. All they're doing is they're lauded in the culture because they're spitting out the indoctrination and the conditioning that was given to them. So the better they
Exactly.
parrot that back out, the more they're considered an expert. And unfortunately,
Exactly.
I've sat at the foot of many of them, and most of them didn't even know what they were talking about. The ones that did know who they were talking about are the ones off on the side, like Bishop John Shelby Spong or Marcus Borg or certain scholars like Elaine Pagels. And Elaine will do something and then she'll say, honestly, I don't know what this means, but I do know that it was altered, it was shifted. I do know that as much as 2/3 of Paul's letters in the Bible that are still in the Bible today are forgeries, things that we know, but you're not even allowed to talk about it because people hate you. Because no, that's the inerrant word of God. And then I comes back again. What does that mean? Tell me what the inerrant word of God means. Then tell me how Jesus can be called only begotten, which means that, of course, the monogenes in the Greek means that he's the only one. And then, of course, he can go and say, you can do all that I've done and even greater things. So either he lied about you can do all that
Right.
I've done, or this over here is wrong.
Right.
It's just common sense. And I say something a lot, and people never thought about it before. And I say it a lot. I say, you're allowed to think. You're allowed to use deduction. You're allowed to use your brain. You're allowed to second guess things. As a matter of fact, I
Oh
would
my
encourage
gosh.
it. And then if you
So
really
good.
want to dig deep, nobody was walking behind Jesus with a dictaphone. Nobody was walking behind
Nope.
him writing these things down. It was decades before it was written down. So is it really even his words? And then people go, hold on. Then why are you even doing this? I'm like, because regardless of who wrote these down, there's something there that's
Well, that
incredibly
code,
powerful. And there's something
yeah,
there in the
exactly.
Hebrew Bible, in Genesis,
Exactly.
Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy. There's stuff there that I think
Absolutely.
is earth shattering in a beautiful way. So,
Yeah, so my husband and I, that is one of the things that has really propelled us in is like as soon as our eyes were able to see the code, because that's what I call it. I don't
mhm,
know what else to call it. But
yeah,
when you start seeing the code, all of the sudden something comes online. I mean,
yeah,
literally something comes online in here. And then, for us getting up at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning so that we can spend 4 to 5 hours studying before we have to go face the world,
yeah.
people are like, you go to bed when? And you get up when? And I'm like,
Hmm.
do you realize that's the quietest time in the morning?
Hmm.
And there are beautiful words that even describe what you do. And let me just express this to you. So the spirit is like pull, and I'm not saying you and you,
Hmm.
I'm just broadsorting here. So the expression is spirit rucha is getting us up early. We are studying, we're coming online. Something is happening, something is changing that is so marvelous that we can't put to words. And then you find a word that was written that explains exactly what has been happening to you. The elation, when you were saying women will bust out laughing or crying, I call it champagne. I get so excited and so
It's the bubbles. It's
animated.
the tickling
Oh my
bubbles.
gosh. So I'll be sitting with my husband, or I'll be sharing. Let's say I'm online with somebody. I've been doing stuff with Steve Conover and my friend Brandon
Mhm.
Dodd, and we'll go through verses live, meaning some of them I've looked into, some of them are like, hey, can we just dig this out? I will find something and then I just get elated. And then sometimes my husband has to come and close the bedroom door because I get so excited that I'm like obnoxious and I can't help it. It literally is joy erupting. I can't, I've never found anything else that does that to me. Nothing,
Yeah.
nothing. And it's like a little kid in the expression of the excitement of being able to see something because you feel it. It's not up here. It's not like I knew this, I read a book. Yeah, it was really profound. It's this, it's chaya, it's life. And there's, I just can't find anything else that does that for me. In fact, I've had people that send me a lot of videos, and I'm sure you've probably experienced this too. They'll watch somebody else share something or a video will come online and then they'll want to send it to me for me to watch. And I can't do it anymore.
I
I mean,
understand
I just
totally.
can't do it anymore because there's so much life within the writings. It's like, why do I want to go to it? Like I said, why do I want to go to another man's message? Why do I want to take somebody else's words? Because the only way I'm receiving them is up here. Maybe some of it'll trickle into here. Maybe it'll change my thought process to begin opening my heart. But the fullness doesn't happen unless you do it yourself.
Yeah. Interesting. It's funny too because I've never mentioned this ever, but so it's an exclusive now. For years,
Oh my
I was
gosh, that's
working
funny.
nights, first in Florida, and then when we moved to Asheville, in manufacturing places that publish, CDs, DVDs, audiobooks,
Right.
all this other stuff. So I'm doing night work. And then it's like on my days off, I'm trying to force myself onto a day schedule, which doesn't work. So I'm always in
No.
this sort of lucid, ethereal, in between multiple dimensions place. But on the side of me doing this night work for years, I'm already, I've been decades already at that point into, since I was 7, really digging into a lot of this stuff. but
Right.
a lot of my study was happening in the dead of night, in the middle of the night. And I'd go out and sit on my porch when it was in the mountains or just on the front porch down in Florida. And I would sit there in the middle of the night with a candle and I would read texts and I'd be going through things and making notes and reading all these books and stuff. So, and there was something very, very different. And then it was like when the sun would start to come up, a lot of times that's when I would actually go to sleep.
Right.
So, but it was like when I, ended up with finally getting married and then we started having kids, I started trying to shift that a little. But it's as if when you get enough of the coordinates on the map lined up, the whole thing clicks down into place. And when it clicks down, it's like light bright. All of a sudden, all the lights
Yes.
come on. And
Yes.
until you get enough of those pivot points down and lined up, it doesn't come online. It doesn't wake up. So all this nice inspiring stuff that these plastic faced preachers, bless your hearts, I love you all dearly, push on a Sunday morning. There could be great storytellers and they could be great orators. Some of them are so plastic that I can't even look at their faces because they're so molded and chiseled. But a lot of times, all the traveling that I was doing for almost 15 years, every Sunday morning before I would go to speak wherever, a lot of times I would have the TV on in a hotel. I'm going to have these guys on, and I'm like, well, it makes sense what he's talking about, but it never went anywhere. It never dug in. It was always about Johnny and his baseball and how he thought it's all this. And I thought, man, you know, we're really, I remember thinking that 15 years ago, we're really in trouble. And I
Right.
did have my anger phase where it was like
Yeah.
15, 20, 25 years ago, I was pissed because it was like, man, we've been lied to, we've been duped.
Right.
The people that are held up as being experts don't even know what they're talking about. All they're doing is parroting out what was put into them. And but I had to go through all that, and then I had to actually put my feet into the way Stanley Tenen will often talk about Arthur Murray dance studios back in the 50s, and it would have the left foot and the right foot, and I think it was blue and red, and it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and you would put your feet into the marks on the floor, and when you do that repetitive pattern, you learn the dance essentially. So I had to actually put this stuff into practice, and then I did, and it shifted and transformed my life. And it was not easy.
No.
So that when sort of my nighttime job did fall away, everybody else is going, God, this is a tragedy. It's the end of the world. I was like, no, it's not. This is the beginning. And I was
Right.
ready because I'd been doing it on the side, and I'd been doing
Exactly.
weekend events, and I'd been doing a Tuesday thing for like 3 years at that point, an Aramaic healing circle for 3 years, and all this other stuff. We're going back 15, 16 years now, so that I was able to just boom, dive right in. And then I get out there and I'm like, I'm not sure if people really want to hear this or not. And then I'd mention the most basic things and they would just go, and then I was like, oh man, I'm going to get addicted to doing this. And I did. And it was amazing. And I actually, even pre COVID, I kind of pulled back and started the mentoring process more just because of the wear and tear of the travel. I had to pull
Sure.
back, and I had a choice before my first book, Echoes of an Ancient Dream, came out. I had a choice of going with a really huge publisher and putting a huge push behind it. But I'm sitting there going, my family is still sitting at home. They're waiting
Right.
for me. I can't afford to bring them out. If
Right.
I go and I do this push and all of a sudden I become a household name in the spirituality or whatever, then I'm going to have even more commitments and I'm going to be away from home even more. Sure, the house gets bigger. We can buy some cars, whatever it may be. And I was like, I'm not doing it. And so many people around me are telling me, you're out of your mind, man. You're actually taking the train off the tracks right now. And I was like, that's exactly what I'm doing. Just as the book is coming out, I took the train off the tracks. And I was like, I'm
Yes.
not doing that anymore. I'm staying home. And that's when I started mentoring with people. This is 6 years ago. And I get so much out of just a one-on-one focus and
Yes.
watching the lights go off and all that
Exactly.
stuff with them than I ever could. Uh, Not that I ever could in a huge group. There's parts of me that miss that. But I prefer to be able to just go at 300 miles an hour instead of these. It's almost like everything had to have a cap on it, and I could only talk, say, at a Sunday service somewhere for 20 minutes, and I had to know
Exactly.
how I was getting in and how I was getting out, and
Yep.
a lot of people would go, "Whoa, whoa, too much."
Well,
and
but
I
see,
needed people that I needed people that didn't slow me down. And I don't mean that in a
exactly.
bad way, but
No, 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 no. Here's the
so
thing is that I can see that when we go, if you go out, Ken and I have only gone one place. We went to Crestone, Colorado, and we had a small gathering, and it was totally spirit led. We didn't even, there were some things that Ken wanted to talk about, but we were like, you know what,
everybody's talking
Ruka,
about Crestone.
Ruka. Oh, I know. Well, there was some amazing stuff that happened there, but really it was because the magic that is of Crestone is because of the people who came. It wasn't the place.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
need to get over the external elements of that because we are it. We are.
Yeah, we're
And
actually looking at Colorado right now too, but a little more
yep,
west and a little more, I think it's west slightly north of Crestone, but yeah, more into the
well,
San Juan Mountains, but
yep. And so, even Ken and I are looking at potentially relocating very much more in an active sense out of Oregon and moving
mhm,
inward as well. But, I think that what I'm seeing is that, and I, if you want to look at the narrated story, okay, just saying the narrated, the surface level, in telegraphing something to us, showing that Yeshua, he would go and talk to the crowds, right? And then he would draw away. How many times do the crowds just come because that there's something that's being said that they're being drawn to, but it's more like it's not it's only for a few, meaning you get people that come because they hear something. Oh, you need to go listen to Dale. You need to
mhm,
listen to what he's sharing. He's listened. And then there's this curiosity, but it's not really from the heart pull. It's a
mhm.
curiosity of the mind. Who is this man? Who is this Dale? Who is this guy that is throwing things, and upending theology and doing all this? I need to go see it for myself, right? And so just for curiosity's sake, but not for heart draw, they show up.
Mhm.
Whereas in a situation where we have technology, there's blessings and curses on both sides of it. But when you can utilize the tools, you can actually reach more of those who really want to hear, right? There's like not the need to
Yeah.
have to, other than the fact that there are times in the intimate gatherings where that heart connect, when you're meeting one another in our avatar flesh suits, there's something that is so energetic, synergistic that happens that, it blows you apart in a beautiful way that you just can't get in this 2D frame essence, even though we begin to make the connections here. So I'm seeing it. Ken and I, we have no desire to get on big platforms. I do not care to have a church call and say, "Can you come and speak to my church because they would love to hear?" I'm like, no, no, I have no desire to do that. I have 750 videos. Actually, I think it's more like 850 videos on our YouTube channel
And how long have you been doing that?
since
YouTube.
only since May of 2020.
See,
I
I
mean,
think I've got maybe, I don't know if it's even 200 videos yet, and I've been going since 2009.
well,
So
I was
that's
pumping
awesome.
out like twice a day. I mean,
Yeah.
because this is, well, seriously, I mean, this is our full-time job, if you
That's it.
want
I
to
mean, I
say
was
it.
just talking with Brandon yesterday, and I told him whatever it is that's lighting you up, keep doing it. Keep doing it.
Exactly.
Keep doing it. Purpose shows up when you're consumed in the present moment and you're wholly fully invested in what you're passionate about, and all of a sudden you go, "Oh, I'm actually living my purpose." And I didn't realize I
Exactly.
knew what it was.
Exactly.
Just take care of the
So,
present moment, follow your bliss, Joseph
yep.
Campbell. So,
And that's exactly why it started. And we were doing on average like 2 videos a day. And then it started going into live streams. And then I started backing up going, you know what? I need to do things a little bit different. That's why I told you I turned off the comments on the videos. And I may turn them back on and just let people talk. But I needed to remove myself from that. I needed
yeah,
to
yeah.
take a break. And so I get it. I would love to take a moment to talk about the Magdalita, if
Hmm.
you're okay with switching
Sure.
gears. What your thought process is, because like I said, it's coming forefront. It's kind of old news for some of us that have been into this, but because it is being spoken of, I would love to hear your perspective of it from the Aramaic side, the energetic signature frequency of the name Magdalita, even Miriam, and what you have seen and how it translates into what we're doing today.
Hmm. Yeah, well, there's a lot I can say, and there's certain things that don't, that there's certain things that I have close to my chest. Just a few things, only because I know they'd be misused, not by you, obviously, but by, there's a couple of things that I need to sort of put into a frame of reference in a format that not necessarily so everybody knows it came from me so much, but so that I'm able to package it, maybe even putting it on a disc that of course would be copied and put on the internet or something. There's some things I've discovered about some things, but there's so much to say here that wraps in with the flower of life, with the
Yes.
tower, with the Magdala stone, if you've seen it. Let me actually, show you some. So I can show you some stuff here that let me pull up on my computer. Just a couple of images here. I'll show some stuff in a sec. But so everybody has this idea, first of all, that, and we have to just speak plainly here. Never mind what the experts say or the supposed Bible historians. And I'll say this too. It's not just Christianity. If you look at Egypt and you look at the pyramid, you look at the Great Pyramid of Khufu and what we do or don't know about that. You look at the Sphinx, etc. You look at the plains there outside of Cairo. There's certain things that the historians, the state-sponsored historians, push as biblical, as not biblical, but as history in terms of dates, etc. But there's things that we know, and they also know, that they're trying to conceal because they don't want people knowing, as an example, that a lot of those structures are several thousand years older than what the common view is, because if they people find these things out, they're going to realize all of the history is manipulated, controlled, and skewed. So just a little bit of an example there. But one of those examples is everybody says, well, okay, Mary of Magdala. It's because she was from Magdala, which was a fishing village. Magdala, depends on who you ask how to pronounce where the accent is, which is on the northwest corner of the Sea of Galilee, which is really a lake. It's just a big lake,
Right.
but
Right.
Sea of Galilee. A lot of evidence we have says that that village didn't actually exist when she was born. A lot of things say she actually came from Egypt. A lot of things say that she came from the bloodline of. Now, we're going to start looking up bloodlines, and I'll say this, always be careful of bloodlines because they can be misconstrued, misinterpreted, and then you start having people saying, oh, I'm of the divine lineage of Yeshua and Magdalene. And I'm like, okay, so let's look
Well,
at that. So you're
well,
telling
okay, let
me
me say
that
that. Why does that
you
even matter?
well, you have holy blood. So you're one of those dots. You're one of these dots here, and somehow that dot is divine lineage and it's better than all the others.
That's what I'm saying.
Horse
Why does it
pucky.
matter? Why does it
Yeah,
matter?
I
Because
know. And
that's the
here's the other
ego.
thing is they'll be like talking about this quest for a physical holy grail. The old French word is graal, which means the earthen receptacle that holds the essence of divinity. That's us. Hello,
Exactly.
McFly. So
Exactly.
but I know all the Indiana Jones of it. It gets excited, and people like the specialness of being, a Magdalene, or the specialness, and that's the one thing that has to be removed. But in
Exactly.
terms of just looking at Magdalita, and of course, it means a tower.
Hmm.
If you want to be pure, tower of salted fish. All right, well, okay, a tower of salted fish. That's nice. The ta sound genders it feminine, so
Right.
Magdalita,
Right.
feminine tower of salted fish. And people will say, well, it's because she was from Magdala. But what about the possibility that it didn't exist? Oh, no, it existed. It's in the Bible. Okay, sure. So there's even evidence that Nazareth, as it is, wasn't a city in the way that we honor it now. Nazareth, Nazareth in Aramaic means initiate. Interesting. But it means
Exactly.
not only initiate, it means initiate. It means
Yes.
the source spark, essentially. So there's a lot to be said there. But Magdalita is an interesting phrase. If you look at, let me show you, this was one of the people that I mentored for several years, and she's still one of my dearest friends. This goes back 7 or 8 years ago. A woman named, and I've got stuff on my channel with her, Nia Peoples. She's an actress. She was on the TV show Fame. She had this amazing movie that I was addicted to as a teen called North Shore about surfing. She was
Yes.
on Pretty Little Liars. She was her main thing that people know her was she was one of Chuck Norris's sidekicks on Walker Texas Ranger, and she was Sydney, and she comes in and kicks everybody's ass with martial arts and all. But she calls me out of the blue It's funny because I screen my calls, and this was going back like 8 years ago. And Loretta and I, my wife and I, are standing next to my phone, and it starts ringing. And I'm like, well, just let the thing pick it up because I don't know who's calling. And all of a sudden, it's like, hello, Dale. This is Nia Peoples. And my hand went whoosh, and like grabbed the phone. I'm like, hello. And she starts explaining who she is. I was like, I know who you are. She's like, you know who I am? Ha ha. And we just started talking. But anyway, she's asking all these questions about Magdalene. She was like, I Googled Mary Magdalene, and she said, you came up on the top page and on Google. And she was like, how much did you pay for that? I was like, I didn't pay anything. I just,
Wow.
I'm just honest with people.
Right.
And she was like, wow. And we started digging in. Anyway, she was going to Magdala, and she was finding all this amazing stuff. I'm going to pull something up. This is the Magdala stone, which this was discovered. It's been how many freaking things do I have open here? Let me wait a sec. It's been close to 10 years now. And of course, there's the menorah. We've got the
Hmm.
water jug, etc. This is just one actual. Um,
Oh, and it has the two pillars.
oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because this is thought to be, the early temple, one of the early temples, of course. So as I shift sideways, this is on the top.
Oh my
Can you see
gosh.
that?
Absolutely.
So this is a very rudimentary flower of
Wow.
life.
Yes, it is.
Now, if you get a stodgy Bible scholar, they're going to say, no, what this is fish in a basket. And I'm like, okay, now
Oh
let's
my
wait for a second here. Yeah,
gosh.
and that's true. And it's like, what is fish in a basket? So now look, this form is called this form right here is called amygdala. And amygdala is an almond. Now, of course, if
Yes.
you
Oh my
follow the
gosh.
almond through, you
This is
follow it
going to the
through,
brain.
yes, and it when you follow it through, it creates a tail and it becomes a fish. So we've got
Exactly.
this here and this here is the fish. Now, the amygdala is, of course, a stereo set of glands that are here, part of the reptilian brain, the limbic system, that record our orgasms, that record our terror, our
Yes.
fear. All of our most intensive emotions are recorded in stereo. Dead center between them in the geographic center of your brain is the pineal gland, of course, which contains very pure, ultra, ultra, ultra distilled water. And funny, and you're like, water, yeah, water, H2O, but it secretes certain chemicals, melatonin, dimethyltryptamine,
Yep.
DMT,
Hmm.
things that we actually naturally produce. Now, without going too deep into this, I'm going to go back to that picture again, actually, briefly, just to show something. Now, if you look at the Magdala stone, if you look at, let me open that back up. Come on. Dun, 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 dun. If you look at this and you've got the fish here
Hmm.
and you've got these, and then if I go and I take the next level and I just twist it so that the head of this one is here and 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 the head of this one is here. And then the next one I twist it a little more and you start
Oh,
spinning
it's the flower of
this.
life. Or, I
You
mean,
start
it's the
spinning it, you're going to
fullness.
create the flower of life. Let me see if
Yes.
I've got tons of flowers of life on my computer, but if I can just pull one up. Actually, here's one that is actually from the video I just posted on YouTube a couple days ago. All this sharing and stop sharing all the time. Hold on a sec.
I know.
All right.
I know. It's
So
so
then
annoying.
open this. This is from the video I just posted. And here's the flower of life. Now, this is
Exactly.
just an example. And right in the middle is what you saw on the
Yes.
Magdala stone. Now,
Yeah.
if you take this and add a layer and shift it slightly toward the left or the right, add a layer, shift it slightly toward the left and the right, what's going to happen is you're going to have this slinky that you're going to create. You're creating the tower of salted fish. Now, let me stop for a second. Why would somebody put salt on a fish? You're trying to do what? Make it eternal. You're trying to make it
Right.
last. So
Exactly.
it's an eternal tower of salted fish. And let's say you open it like a slinky and look at it, you have the RNA or the DNA helix.
Yes.
Now, you also
So
have,
good.
and this is the
So
part that I
good.
can mention but not go deep into, the thing that I can only work one on one with someone. You also have a visualization of a very specific breathing pattern that actually opens one up to what's called the central pillar in Egyptian. And I will say this too, where's the fish? The fish is in the water. The word for baptize in Aramaic also means central pillar.
Of course it would
And
be.
what's interesting is on the Magdala stone, you have two pillars, but in the
Mm-hmm.
center, between those two pillars, is where the flower is.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the center between what appears to be the foundation of the temple. But where's the temple? It's
Right
right
here.
here. So when you start looking deeper into this, it's like, hold on a second here. We have a technology that literally has been buried in the dirt for almost 2,000 years with that stone. And I'm sorry, it's hard not to laugh. The experts all come out of the woodwork and they don't have a damn clue what they're talking about. They're looking at a pile of fish in a basket because it was a fishing village. And I'm sorry, it's like, and Nia comes to me and she was like, Dale, I need you, I need to show you this stuff. I want to, and we went full on, head first. And we were doing these 2-hour calls several times a week for months on end. Every question she throws at me takes us into another wormhole. And it's amazing. We ended up doing a lot of work together and stuff. But it's funny because that's another perfect example that when all the theology is wrapped around it, and this is quoting a dear friend of mine, Dr. Albert LaChance. He says what unfortunately happens is the theology, the ideology will ultimately boil down, standardize itself, and harden and become a barrier to prevent the transmission of consciousness that it was put there for in the first place.
Yep.
So it's so hard for a lot of people to let go of that theology because they think they're standardizing the Word of God. And I'm like, if you standardize it, it's not the Word of God. It's a finger pointing at the moon. It's not the moon. Get
Right.
your dog and say, look, throw the treat. It's there. It's there. Eckhart Tolle does this. And he's like, the dog is the smartest dog in the world. They're going, oh, they're watching your finger. The treat is there. It's on the floor and you point there. Only when you physically get down and say, the treat is there. And he goes,
Right.
oh, look, a treat. It's like, that's what we're doing with all the theology. So, I mean,
I wanted to
excuse me,
add that this is
I
really
find it to
cool
be
that
hilarious, but
it
it's
is funny.
empowering.
It
People
is.
say, how come all this stuff had to be locked away where we couldn't see it for so long? Why did it have to be concealed? I'm like, because waking up to it is so damn sweet.
Yes, it
I
is.
would
It's like
never
this
want to live
beautiful
in any
gift.
other point in time as
No,
much as I would right now. Even while the House of Cards crumbles down, I know that
exactly.
the House of Cards is a movie in the theater. And
Yep.
it's hard to forget, and it's hard to let go of certain things because my children are here, and I'm going to have grandchildren walking this earth, and it
Yes.
doesn't look like it's getting better. But yet, I know that their essential nature is untouched,
Yep.
and it won't be touched by enemy. So anyway, that's just a little bit of some Magdalene things there, and people
I
have
love
to
that.
remember that it won't work with just a focus on the masculine, on Jesus. And it doesn't work with 51% Jesus and 49% Magdalene. It has to be 50-50. And going into the bridal chamber and the yin yang and the ideas of the I Ching and deepen the Gnosticism of what adultery actually means and what's the nature of sin, when you start getting into all these things and what they actually meant versus what the church purports them to be, because they're, bless their dear hearts, clueless. And I mean, even people at the head of the Catholic Church, there's people in there that know this.
Mm-hmm.
It's none of the people that are heading it up. It's people
Mm-hmm.
that are sort of the behind the scenes, behind the curtains in the shadows, so to speak, that know a lot of these things. But the fact that they are still holding things back proves to me that they haven't realized them, because once they're realized and activated, you can't hold it back anymore.
No, you can't. And it's interesting when you were talking about that slinky and then turning with the DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was sent information by Steve Conover, our friend Steve,
I
and
love
with
Steve.
Dan Winters, and how physics is showing the change in our spin from being negentropic from entropic. And so you just connecting everything with the Magdalita and
Mm-hmm.
the flower of life and the spinning in our DNA. It's just going to show that all of this is meant for it to be received and revealed now because
Yes.
we are ready for it. And again,
And I barely scratched the surface.
I
There was
know,
so
and
much I
that's why
didn't say about the central pillar and what awakening, what was the temptation in the desert, and how it all relates to baptism. And there's so many things people just
can
don't
we
see
have
it. So
another time with each other in a
totally,
couple weeks?
completely,
Because
I absolutely.
I want to talk about that. I really, really want to talk about that. But for me, what I see is that, first of all, let me just honor you again, just because you're my brother. You're an amazing individual that has been a pioneer on this. And I want to thank you for all of us for charging ahead and doing this for 30 years versus those who are coming into it now, because I understand the cost to a degree, not to the fullness, but the cost for you and the things that you had to endure by pioneering something that humanity wasn't ready for. But because you did, you have sown seeds. You have sown seeds into this beautiful sea of consciousness, allowing those of us who have come behind you to have these new neural pathways available for us to seek and find. And like, oh, here's a door. And
You're
we've
going to
been
find
able
stuff
to
I
do
never
that.
saw. So
Well,
that's what's
and
amazing.
we're meant to.
Yeah.
But again, I just want to honor you for your work, because without your work and me not even knowing you, but yet the work that you did helped my husband and I to have the door open for us as well, because of everything that you did prior to us finding it ourselves. And may the work that we do it for somebody else that is coming afterwards, because I know that's how it's meant to be. And so I really do honor you as a human being. I love you as a brother. I'm very excited about our conversation today, and I really want to get into greater about the Magdalita and everything that you just started.
We can do that.
But we're, an hour and 10 to have somebody
Yeah.
sit and listen to our conversation for an hour and 10 minutes. That's amazing. But I know we've just barely scratched the surface.
Yeah.
So thank you
Thank
again. Todah Rabbah, Tebuta, for what you've done. And I can't wait. I'll set up another time where we can chat. We'll do it in a couple weeks and go from there. I love you very much.
I love you. And I'll get this out to everybody. I'll send it out to my email list. People would love to see this, because I talked about some stuff I've actually never talked about before. So,
oh, well,
publicly.
Thank you.
So.
I think that because, okay, one more thing, because you get more of us that are in the languages, more is opening up. And so the dialogue can be had, because now it's not just like you looking around going, who else can I discuss this with? There's these connections that are happening in this beautiful fabric of what, Allah is bringing together right now. And we get to share it with one another. And
20 years ago, I would do an event about Magdalene, and there'd be one person.
Oh my gosh.
And she was in the wrong room. So, I thought this was the one about auto mechanics. No, this one's not about auto mechanics. What's this about?
Mary Magdalene. It's very much time. Right.
The hooker? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's about, yes, that's her.
That's what we're talking about today. The women of the night. Well, I look forward to it, and I know other people will, as you begin to help unveil this so people can really comprehend. And so I encourage people to go see your YouTube channel, to go to your website, and if people want to spend time with you in your tutoring and mentoring process,
I got the whole new website's been up since the last time we talked.
Yeah,
so
that's perfect. So thank you again. I look forward to our next conversation.
Bye.
Bye.